And we have a family of a woman who also was shot in the war-torn Sudan seeking help. This is how we are affected. Sarah Waidera says her daughter was scampering for safety when she was hit by a stray bullet. She's yet to get treatment. A family in Shabab ward in Nakuru has appealed to the government to help evacuate their daughter stranded in Sudan amid the ongoing turmoil. Sarah Waidera revealed her daughter, Mary Njeri, had been shot in the arm while scampering for safety when clashes erupted between the army and the paramilitary on Friday. And also looking at the dailies as well, like the daily in Uganda, this is Daily Monitor. Over 300 Ugandans caught up also in Sudan. This is how this war is affecting us as well. We had the president speaking to members of IGAD as well. This is President William Ruto, and we just want to hear the sentiments that they were put on the table regarding the current situation in Sudan.
ISF. This is a testament to how concerned our leaders.
He's bad both for the Sudanese.
Because he's a younger man, he can run around.
Because of where we are and the real danger that Sudan faces today with the sporadic fighting, and therefore I have 3 suggestions to make. That number 1, as IGAD and as heads of state, that we ask for an immediate cessation of hostilities between the combatants. Number 2 is to move with speed and conclude on this one matter, on the matter that is causing this whole problem. We provide a mechanism as IGAD, together with our partners, on how this single matter of integration of RSF is resolved. The timeline is resolved. We should not allow this single matter to torpedo the whole agreement and the efforts of many Sudanese people, Sudanese institutions, IGAD, AU, and the UN. We should not allow this to go down the drain. We should resolve that single matter as a matter of urgency.
Indeed, it is a matter of urgency in Sudan. Immediate cessation of fire, the president calling out for it, but we just had a 24 ceasefire, but that is actually in the corners of tapering away so far. Let's just begin with you, Ahmed Hashi. Where did it begin beating, of course, the rain beating down on Sudan?
Well, I agree with the president. The president is absolutely right. I agree with him 100%. There's been absolutely a cessation of hostilities. The militia group have to be integrated into the Sudanese army. There's no question about that. And then the framework for the civilian transition, so that the military can get out of the politics of Sudan, is what should follow. Dabal, if I could put a little bit of context before I give it to my seniors and my colleagues. Dabal, I said in the last show, or the one before, that 15 countries on the Sahel region were at the cusp of becoming failing states like Somalia. Dabal, the Sudan's problem, as I correctly predicted last time, was that there was going to be an organic crisis of the state in Sudan, because the first thing that caused this problem, Dabal, is the division of Sudan into 2 countries, which has caused a lot of crisis. Secondly, Dabal, is the military dictatorship and the coup d'etat that happened, where they overthrew the transition civilian government of Mr. Hamdok. Third, Dabal, is the Sudanese army's involvement in the economy of Sudan. Debal, you know, the RCF was the Janjaweed. And people don't remember that it is Lieutenant General Burhan that trained them under Umar al-Bashir when they were causing havoc in Darfur. Mr. Burhan, President Burhan and his Vice President Debal are the ones who overthrew General Bashir from power. When they got into power, Debal, the pressures of the international community and IGAD and African Union made sure that there was going to be a transition to civilian rule. That is how there was a prime minister, Mr. Hamdok, who was given power to manage the country so that they could move to elections and in the Sudan. Debal, you know that there was a popular revolution in Sudan, and it is the army that stopped it. These are the effects of the popular revolution in Sudan. And about the RSF led by Mr. Mohammed Ahmed Hamadi is deeply involved, Debal, in crimes and war crimes and crimes against humanity in Sudan, particularly in Darfur during the Janjaweed. And Debal, you know that Sudan consists of many ethnic groups, and many of them come from the Sahel. And the Vice President there comes from the eastern part of the country, and his ethnic group is represented all the way up to the borders of Senegal. And about the cleavages of misrule, the cleavages of political ethnicism, the cleavages of corruption, the RSF, Debal, controls the largest gold mine in Sudan. And this gold mine, Debal, is why the RSF is fighting the army. You know that the Sudanese army, Debal, is one of the major stakeholders of the Sudanese economy. And this is the reason why they don't want the RSF to come inside and deal with this thing. Debal, president of our country, is the youngest president we have in this region. And he should have been on a flight to Khartoum yesterday. Because Debal, Sudan is too important to lose. The international community is speaking about it. You could see in Japan that the foreign ministers of the G7 are very, very concerned about it. The head of the African Union, Debal, should have been there yesterday. The chairman of, there's no time to waste. They should be there. The very strong delegation should land in Khartoum with the protection, with military protection, which can be done, and immediately ask for a ceasefire. And Debal, there's two very important things that you also have to add to this. Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states have to get their hands out of Africa. They're involved here in Somalia, Debal. The United Arab Emirates is the one that is with funding Hamdani. The Saudis are the ones who are funding and helping General Burhan. There are Saudi troops fighting, the Sudanese troops fighting in Yemen. And we're grateful to hear that there's a peace deal coming up in Yemen. Debal, the Sudanese problem is an African problem. It is a problem of the IGAD. It is the problem of the African Union. We can get support from the Europeans. We can get support from the Americans. We can get support from the G7 to put more pressure on these people. We can get support from the Middle East. The support we want from the Middle East is to stop interfering in the politics of another country and causing there to be these kinds of tensions. That is where the flare-up started about. There is a difference between the UAE and Qatar. There's a difference between Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and their power struggles are being played around here in the Horn of Africa. That is why it is not settling. About thirdly, I think that this is a golden opportunity. There's always an opportunity in a crisis for there to be leadership and to own this issue, and to say that we here in our region have always said we want African solutions to African problems.
Thank you. All right, let me just bring in Brigadier Ahmed on this as well, because it seems there are outside players who are interfering with this particular or the current situation in Sudan as it is. Going back to the civilian agreements that to try and restore civilian rulership back in Sudan has not really come to light so far. But there's a danger of this particular war in Sudan turning into a very protracted conflict, and many are fearing that the war could drag into regional patterns and neighboring countries such as Chad, Egypt, Eritrea, and even Ethiopia. So what is your assessment, an estimation on this And even the ceasefire that began at 6 o'clock, running for 24 hours just for civilian safety and humanitarian aid accessibility. How do we contain the situation?
Hampshire has put a very strong case in terms of the background, which I want to also maybe add on, that you must realize that since independence in the 50s, Sudan has had only one civilian president. Us were interim. All the rest were military.
Yeah.
That is where the issue is. And we cannot operate that way. And in Africa, that's a challenge. Where you find the military coming in, a coup is done, and then they come and say, now democracy, we are elected. And very many are sitting on that ticket today, and that's the time bomb. If you are to give back to the civilians, you must give back totally. And go back to the barracks. Because we cannot really run both. In fact, what I want to call it, you cannot politicize the military. In the same token, you cannot militarize the state, which is the case now in South Sudan. In Sudan, rather. They know only military, they know nobody else, and the series of coups have gone on in this country. As long as this continues, it can't stop. And they know what is going on. Now, unfortunately, again, the fact that other than being in government and leadership, that the military controls the economy. Very dangerous indeed. They're in everything that is going on in that country. And they can't get out of it. To get out is very complicated. Again, unfortunately, the fact that this team led by Hamdit was actually a creation of al-Bashir. Full creation of al-Bashir. Why? Because he feared the military at that time. And they formed a force that was well prepared, well equipped, under the guise of dealing with Darfur. And they did a very bad act there. They achieved the aim, yes they did. Full use of force, and they got it. Under Janjaweed. I know even with the UN there, found it very hard. With Janjaweed, it was very complicated. Now, where are we today? In a situation where they are called together to come and talk. The two principals, the two military heads, one head, one the deputy. But again, they couldn't agree on the terms. Issue of power again. Fight for power. Now, you asked about the implications. Yes. This will have major implications on the region and beyond. And in fact, as Hashi said, the interference by the other countries should stop. The Middle East, UAE, Saudi and all that must stop. It must be an African problem. There's no doubt, as this goes on, all the neighbors will come in. Chad will pull in because of the Darfur issues. Ethiopia will come in because of the dam and the people around there. Egypt cannot be left out of all that. They've taken sides already. They've taken sides. South Sudan is in it with their issues in terms of the engagement has been there. Kenya is, even Uganda, as far as it is, you can't rule out. So, the best answer is pull out the external hands. Let's get IGAD and the AU take charge. And as they do that, find a lasting solution. The military is not an answer to the future of Sudan. The military must go to the barracks and have a proper elections and have a government led actually purely by civilians. That's my take.
Okay. Naomi Dambo, we have also, as you said, Egypt has taken sides because it's supporting Burhan.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have Russians as well.
Yes. Wagner, yes.
Who's supporting
Hamdit, yeah.
Yeah. And Russia, the Wagner are still on the ground as it is. Now, I was just reading, because even from the US leaks, that Egypt was to supply some arms to Russia before. Yeah?
Yes.
But right now, they've changed tack, they're supplying arms to Ukraine.
Yeah.
How will also this exacerbate the situation on the ground? Because it seems now this is Russia versus Ukraine thing that is happening also in Sudan.
They're supplying arms to Russia.
Yeah, they're supplying arms to Russia.
Dubal, you just touch on the area that I really feel, gentlemen, is the core of the issue right now. And if that is the case, then it may even go bigger than the Africans you are talking about, than AU and IGAD. It can easily, the direction it's taking, it become a geopolitical rivalry.
It's already a geopolitical issue.
Geopolitical rivalry between the US,
Russia.
US and Europe pit against Russia. And here's the reason why I'm saying that. The Soviet Union had incredible influence on Sudan. As you know, at one point, the Soviet Union had Somalia, they had Ethiopia, they had Yemen, and they had Sudan as their core in this area. Given the current state of international conflict, Russia need the Mediterranean and they need the Horn of Africa. Russia already have facility in Sudan for servicing their Novo facility in there. Russia, as the Wagner Group, as we're talking, that are digging gold and taking over to Russia. Russia is supplying arms to the Sudan right now. And recently, as you remember, the foreign minister of Russia traveled to Sudan. And at the same time, the US also traveled to Sudan, followed by groups of Europeans that also traveled to Sudan. So the issue between RSF and the military is magnifying and becoming a global geopolitical conflict. We're into a Cold War, gentlemen, and it's just beginning right now. So the issue is now bigger than Africa itself. UN Secretary General has got to get involved. AU has to be involved. IGAT has to be involved to create a framework which will allow Sudan to be neutral from Russian influence, neutral from American influence. Then you now, technically, realistically, you begin addressing the issue that affect the area, because it's going to engulf several African states, and the first Cold War will be fought on the continent of Africa.
If I may come to you, Ambassador Rastus Moincha, and we dial back, you as the Deputy Chair of the African Union. No, Sudan has been on the table when we had the larger, Sudan, before we had the secession of South Sudan and Darfur, and Muslim pitting against the Christians, and then we had the international community saying we have to split. It seems there's still some sentiments that is still simmering underneath that was not really between the North Sudan and the South Sudan. But right now, there are systemic issues that they're underlaying from the international community. Were these seeds sown even during that time that we had the whole block of North and South Sudan?
A very important question. Thank you very much for that very important question. But I also want to build on what my colleagues have said, and I totally agree with the contributions that have been put on the floor. Yes, indeed, as you asked me when I was at the African Union, I happened to have handled the file of Sudan for quite some time also, by virtue of my position. And I remember traveling to Doha a number of times for peace agreements. I've been to Darfur to see the forces there. So yes, I have some little understanding of it. And as a matter of fact, Abdar Hamdok is a good friend of mine. He was serving as number 2 at the ECA, and I was number 2 at the AU. And so we were like brothers. We still call each other brothers. So I know a little bit about Sudan. Just like he said, and also he mentioned it, the history of Sudan is complex. You have to go back and understand that Sudan gained independence in 1956, but what was the road to independence? It was Anglo-Egyptian rule of Sudan. It was not colonized by one power, it was colonized by 2 powers, Egypt and UK. And so when UK gave them power, they left a state that was already dysfunctional, a state that had a lot of challenges, because as they were running Sudan as an entity, Sudan was already operating like two, not necessarily split, but the southern part of it, which was largely Christian and animist, were not, they didn't feel to belong in it because slavery was conducted over a long period of time. And these people felt, the southern part of it, which is South Sudan, they felt that they were marginalized. And that is the history up to now. And so that's why they said, we don't want to belong to this family because we have not been treated as members of the family.
Yeah, they were marginalized. And of course, we have the issue of slavery.
Yes.
That the South Sudanese, they acted as slaves for the northern Sudanese.
Absolutely.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. That story continues. Now, moving fast forward, independence comes, as the general says. And I'm happy the general spoke because I wasn't sure I was going to say this before the general spoke. Of the 67 years that Sudan has been independent from 56, it's only about 11 years they have had some resemblance of peace. The rest has been war and war. And what are the issues? It is because the many tribes referred to have failed to live together. And that is because some regions, in fact, to answer the question you asked about South Sudan, there are 4 regions threatened that if you allow South Sudan to go, we'll also ask for association. And so that is still an issue, that Bashir allowed South Sudan to go. But Bashir had opportunities. In fact, when we were there, we tried to persuade Bashir to say, build an environment for South Sudan not to break away. And Garang was almost ready to say, look, if there is genuine cohabitation and we can all feel that stay. Even Garang can become president of Sudan, we'll stay. But Bashir couldn't do it. Now, you remember even Bashir, in fact, they have held together as a nation today because of AU. Because AU protected Bashir from going to ICC when he was inducted. And one of the reasons, the crimes which had been committed in Darfur, the generals that were inducted, he was told, arrest or judge or do something about it. He refused. Bashir never participated in those, but his generals did. Bashir refused, so he was now dragged to ICC. African Union protected him, and that's how the country held together. It would have been like Libya the other day. So the danger now is for Sudan. It could also go Libyan way. That in the end, you have a dysfunctional state. And when all is said and done, I think let's now say, what is the way forward? The way forward, I agree with Noah when he says, oh, it's bigger than AU, let's bring the UN. But here is my take. UN is dysfunctional now. And if you are talking of Russia having taken a position, US has taken a position, you cannot go to UN Security Council and have a resolution passed because they veto it. And so UN can't. In fact, perhaps African Union, and I'm not praising this because I come from that part, African Union could have a chance if only it is mandated to say, look, like what happened in Kenya. Let me say this. Here is a situation. You now have too many players. I remember if you have too many players to a solution, no, you're not going to get a solution because they all have their own interests. You have named them. You've named them. There is US, there is Russia, there is Qatar, there is Iran, there is everybody's there. And so with all those interests, the best way you can do it is what Kofi Annan did in Kenya. When Kofi Annan came to Kenya, he told everybody, move away, stay away, and I am going to be in charge of these negotiations alone. Everything went through him, and he had a ring fence around the negotiators, and he didn't allow anybody else to infiltrate and talk to them or talk to the system. And so he managed that process alone. That is the way we should go. And that's one thing I would add to what the president said, that ask everybody else to take their hands off, have one negotiator, mandate that negotiator should be the only one doing it. That way you can be able to achieve. As it is, you will be protracted, as you said, and the country will continue to suffer. Let me say one last thing, the economy. The biggest challenge has always been the economy. Just a few statistics. Sudan population today is about 45 million people. The GDP is about $35 billion. It's about 750 per capita. So it's a very small economy in terms of the economy. But the resources, enormous. The debt Sudan has is over 60 billion.
It's huge.
With a GDP of about 30 billion, GDP is twice, the debt. So they are struggling. And in fact, if you see the road to removing Bashir, it is the economy that pushed Bashir out. And now that has not been addressed. So there are so many moving parts that really to address the issue of Sudan, you require a structured system. And as it is, AU, supported by IGAD in a way, can do it, but they only need one person to do it, not all these chorus.
Right. Before I come to Hashi, I wanted just to ask where Bashir sits today. Does he rue the day that he allowed South Sudan to cease?
I'm sure he regrets.
Or he made a good decision?
I'm sure he regrets very much. And still, even there are some generals who are sympathetic to him. As you said, the generals manage that economy. And so those that Bashir contributed to that by allowing them, because he thought with the generals ruling, partaking of the economy, they will protect him. But in the end, the very generals stand against him.
Right.
Yeah.
But given the history of even where we're coming from, I think it's very systemic with the Arab slavery in Africa and the way it was constituted with the North and the South.
Okay.
Even if they coexisted as a nation, there's still the underlying sentiments about, you are superior to me. I'm a slave. There's a slave mentality.
That's true.
Let me
answer that directly. The people of Sudan look like you, look like Nomi Damba, look like the general, look like him, look like me. They are Africans, Debal. Just because you and I today, Debal, are speaking English, it does not make us Englishmen from Yorkshire. We are Africans. Our legacy is the one of colonial legacy. The problem of the Sudan is the colonial legacy, and also the failure of the political elite of the Sudan to overcome the problems of ethnic division, the problems of this crisis of the state and of the market, to create what is called a nation. Debal, we have successful projects of nationhood in this region. Just go here to Tanzania, Debal. The president of Tanzania is a hijabi Muslim woman from a rural village in Zanzibar. The president of the Revolutionary Council of the Tanzania Union is a young man from a small village in Zanzibar. Nobody in Tanzania looks at them and says, oh, they're from Zanzibar. Oh, she's a Muslim. Oh, she's a Christian. Because the great patriot of this continent, the Honorable Julius Kabarega Nyerere, stood up and said, we are not going to accept this nonsense in our country. And Debal, this is the crisis of the state and the market in the rest of Africa. While some leadership stood up to these issues that they knew were going to come and confront us, the rest decided they were going to loot the country, they were going to go to the way of corruption, they were going to personal interest, and the failure of leadership, Debal, now is awash in probably the richest continent, Debal, in the world. The Sahel, the 15 countries from beginning all the way from Senegal, all the way to Port Said, Debal contain the largest deposits of every kind of mineral you find on this earth, including oil. The amount of petrol and oil that is in the Sahel is 3 times the size of the one in the Middle East. The petrol that you find in the minerals you find in the Somali Republic is bigger than the rest of the Middle East. The reason why the Middle East states are involved in the political economy of our region is because states act in their own self-interest. They want to make sure that their economies and their funds and their political power reaches the zenith at the cost of the other states. What is the responsibility, Debal, you ask, about the political leadership in our continent? It is very, very simple, that we need to stand with Sudan. Debal, we cannot allow in Africa for Libya to fall. We cannot allow for Sudan to fall. We cannot allow for Egypt to fall. Then we allow South Sudan to fall. Debal, Kenya will be next. We have to put a red line somewhere and say, no, no, no. And how do we deal with it, Debal? By now, there should have been 5 presidents on a plane in the airport in Khartoum. Before that, what should they do? They should call the two leaders and say, the South African government is sending 2 battalions of a military mechanized unit that is going to land at that airport to make sure that our presidents are safe, number one. And then the 5 presidents would come to that airport under a secure airport from the troops from South Sudan, which would, you know, my problem, Debal, with intervention is that your neighbors should never intervene in your country. It should be always another country that's away from it.
Correct.
South Africa is the strongest, largest black state we have in Africa. It has the resources. President Cyril Ramaphosa should be on the phone with President Ruto, President Kagame, the president of Algeria, and the president of Ethiopia, and goes directly to that country and sit down with these 2 gentlemen and hammer out a ceasefire and a constitutional issue in which we could get civilian government. Debal, I advise the government, I advise this government to get a special envoy for the Horn. You remember this? By now, we would have had the early warning signs of this special envoy telling us what is going on in this region and what are the issues that are being contentious and what is the possibility of a blow-up. We should have had an early warning system over these issues of the Sudan. And Debal, not only should we do that now, we should do it immediately. The president of this country needs a special envoy to the Horn of Africa, a person who knows what is going on in this country. We have very many distinguished people, but right now, the number one thing, and I agree with President Ruto, is the ceasefire. There should be 5 countries representing South Africa, the Great Lakes, Mr. Kagame, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Algeria, to go straight to that airport and summon those 2 men and sit with them. And first of all, there should be a ceasefire. And then they should hammer out over a period of a week what the issues are going to be and how it's going to be implemented, and then leave a commissar or a group of people to take up, as the chairman of the African Union, to take up these issues. There are many people here who are generals in the army. They should be advising President Ruto now about what should be the next step. These are the contributions we have to make, not only criticizing, not only talking about the history, but offering concrete solutions to what should be done.
Well, I wanted just to broach the issue of the involvement of Egypt so far, because we had earlier the Egyptians or the Egypt military having a joint military exercise and naval drills also in Sudan. If Egypt has actually opted and elected to support Burhan's forces, and we have the paramilitary and the military itself, was this also a waiting powder keg to explode? Because Egypt has taken sides. Here you are in a joint military exercise. Here you are in a naval drill exercise as well. So from the beginning, was this something that was simmering? And then I think last week is when we just briefly touched on the issues of how the paramilitary has been slighted, and this is going to explode, and now it has exploded.
It has the ball, unfortunately.
So from the I wanted to just pick up on the Egypt issue.
And I think it's really move out of hand at this moment. And here's the reason why I'm saying Sudanese military under command is about 200,000 people. These are the group, Janjaweed, the rest, about 70,000. There are all other groups who are joining in. You remember the civilian joined together to move Brazil. Most of them are armed. You know, they're ready to fight. So the situation is rather dicey, the bow. And you know, actually he is right. Nkrumah called for African high command, African military that can't go in right now and tell America and tell Russia, please stay out, we are in charge, support us. That is in vacuum. Egypt has a very powerful military.
But we have standby forces. Don't we have standby forces?
Yeah. So which side is Egypt in the international, geopolitical, international equation? It's going to matter.
Yeah, Brigadier, from a military perspective, if you, for instance, Kenya, they go to Sudan and you take sides with the military drills and naval also operations there, and we know maybe Kenya has taken sides. How is that also supposed to exacerbate the situation? Was it the right move for Egypt to do?
I'll
And now we saw the Egyptian soldiers were captured, actually.
Yeah, I'll say that military cooperation across states is normal. It's normal. And you know that in this particular case, Egypt sought support of Sudan over the Guard in Ethiopia. And there were issues around that, you know, which is still on. And out of that, you find the element of that cooperation between Ethiopia and Sudan. And indeed, this came on a bit earlier. It wasn't tied very much to what is going on now. So I'll say, in terms of government to government, there was nothing wrong with that. Because at that point, Burhan was still in charge. He was still running the show with Hemdit as his deputy. That was quite okay. What has come up came afterwards, you know, not at the initial point. Because when this thing broke up, initially they were on. The two were, in fact, together. When they removed al-Bashir, they came together. One became the head, one the deputy. And things were running well. What the problem now is the issue of the transition now of the rapid support force into the military, which they couldn't agree on. Again, because of, I want to say, the issue of who is more powerful. Once they agree and they move on, the person who is more powerful at the helm of the state can do anything. That's the African, what we have learned in Africa. At the top can do anything. And therefore, to build his case, Hamid asked for a long time transition, almost 10 years, to say, give us time. Let's build this slowly. We can have us coming in slowly. And then we are fully integrated. Burhan is saying no. It should be immediately, then immediately conclude and move on. And because of that, they couldn't agree. But in terms of bilateral military training and cooperation, that is normal. That is normal. I think the timing may have been wrong. That it came just at the foot of this crisis, but that is normal in the region. It does happen.
But the 10-year plan.
Let me comment on that a little bit. Why Egypt looms large in Sudan? First of all, the politics of the water, as the general said. The Nile in Sudan is about 2/3 of the Nile itself. And if you look at what Sudan is going through, Sudan is not even able to feed itself. Yet all this water can go to Egypt, and Egypt is able to feed itself from that water itself. So Egypt has always had a very keen eye to make sure that any government that is in Sudan is friendly. In fact, when Hamdok was there as prime minister, Hamdok took a neutral position. He didn't want to fight the Ethiopians, he didn't want to fight the Egyptians, and because of that, Egypt didn't support him. And so, Hamdok, you see the rest of it. There is also another aspect. Hamdit has support from the Muslim Brotherhood. Is that what they call it?
Correct.
Yeah. Correct. And for that, Egypt sees red. Egypt cannot get. And so Egypt, there is existential threat for Egypt on the water, but also political threat that if you allow Hamdit, because then the Muslim Brotherhood will find itself in the southern part of it, which is hostile to Egypt. So there is a complication here, and that's why one has then to look at it with different lens when it comes to how do you deal with neighbors who are being, yes, the military may have been done there, there is nothing wrong as the general says, but there is something deeper than just simply an exercise.
About the Sudanese Republic, probably the oldest country in this continent, has had a history of ideological factions. It has got the oldest communist party. It has the Islamic Brotherhood. It has the military institutions. Ideological battles are a very, very, very important factor in Sudanese politics. Secondly is ethnicity and all these other things. The Islamic Brotherhood has had a huge influence on the politics of Sudan, and my learned senior is very right in saying that. The issue today, Debal, is the crisis of the state in our continent. And I've argued here on this program for a long time that there has to be a systematic understanding of why there is such problems with the issues of democratic rule in Africa. And the bullet is very simple. The military in Africa is the most organized institution there is. the military, is the most organized institution we have in the continent. The democratic institutions in this country, Debal, are not as organized. Their chain of command is very feeble. The British traditions in Kenya have allowed us to have stability and to have the military in the barracks and civilian control of the military, even though there was twice an attempted coup in this country. One by supposedly, allegedly by General Ndolo, and the other one that was put down by General Mohammed Mahmoud. Debal, so it is the military, when the military is invited always to the State House, to the bureaucracy, and they see the civilians are not better than them, immediately in their mind they start saying, we can take care of these fellows and take over. Debal, so there has to be a clear disjuncture that we must understand the concept of the government is of the people, it's by the people, and it is for the people. Well, in Sudan fails, if Sudan goes down the drain, Debal, South Sudan, which is teetering at the edge of another disaster, will be next. And Debal, Ethiopia, you've seen what has happened in Ethiopia. You see, Somalia has been like this for 30 years. Uganda is being held by a strongman. All the states that are surrounding our country, Debal, are on the edge. Kenya has a fundamental responsibility. In fact, it is our #1 national security issue, that we cannot allow that the states surrounding us to collapse, which will have a massive impact on our economy, on our society. And we ourselves here in Kenya are still struggling to put our house in order. We have refused to shoot at each other. We have refused. But if we continue down the path of what we are doing today, we will not be different from the Sudan. I therefore urge our president, and I think it's very important that we talk to the people in South Africa, especially the president of South Africa, president of Algeria, President Kagame, President Ruto, and that they urgently need to go and secure Sudan today. Otherwise, we'll pay dire consequences come 3 months.
Right. Let me come just to Brigadier before I come to Professor Nomedama, because you raised the issue of the 10-year plan that we had Hamdit really seeking, but that was not really forthcoming also from the other side of Burhan. I wanted to ask the question, don't you think from your estimation also 10-year plan with a very dicey, fluid situation is a long year? Or
it's a long shot.
Actually, it's a long term to actually wait for you to know what will be the result. It could be after 10 years, then you're shortchanged.
Yeah, that is true.
From the beginning, yes. And how will that have been, treated in the wisest of fashion so that we don't have the current situation like it is?
My understanding in that is that what Hamdit was doing was more like holding on to the strings for a longer period so that my Burhan has no free hand to do what he wants to do. So in 10 years, you move on together slowly, almost as equals. One is a bit higher, but almost as equals. And you can talk to each other and see how things get on. Then he has that freedom.
But there's no equality, because you are illegitimate.
Yeah, but
you
again,
as a ragtag, military, how could you have morphed that into an institution sort of that is acceptable to the public?
No, but remember that Deba, that Hamdit and his rapid support force was not illegal. It was formed formally by al-Bashir. Formed, armed very strongly, and told, go and deal with the Darfurians. But indirectly, what he was doing was having a force on a side that should the military come against him, he can hold on to. And they were very well armed. In fact, I want to call back what we had during the Kenyan succession, what we had in the Goroko issue and all that. Forces were very well armed, very strong, serving somebody. This was no different. It was official. It was from the government, not illegal. They served the purpose, and they used force, full force, to bring order, and they did. They did that. So when they came back, what they're asking for, we have to come back as equals. And to be equals, we want time to grow together. So that if you don't hold together as you go along, I can pull out. And pulling out is not good for the state. But you're just buying time to allow for that smooth transition, while he's still very strong. And there's something to bank on, because, as I said, the issue of, as you said, one is stronger. The stronger one can always do what he wants to do. Always. I remember this guy was very powerful. Heritage was very powerful. He has full control of minerals. He's very much involved in other activities and all that. He's not a small man. You can't hold him down. No. You can't have them as equals also. So the better thing is hold them by your side for 10 years, move on together. That's enough. As we say, time is a healer. In those 10 years, they'll be able to accommodate each other, work together, and get to where they want to get to. But the government said, no. Immediately, what you have, bring in, they become part of the armed forces, and fit the system, and let's move on. He said no to that.
Okay, no, Madam, you wanted to say something.
Dubai. What I want the nation and people watching us to understand is that this thing is big. This thing is a proxy war, which is beginning to divide the entire world. Pitting China somewhere, pitting Russia, Europe, and America together. And it's going to divide Africa, and it's going to create the most mayhem that this continent has never seen. And so, instead of the head of state going to, in the middle of shooting war, they need to be at Addis Ababa right now, calling the Secretary of UN Secretary to be full attentive to the issue affecting Africa. In other words, IGAD, AU structure, UN structure need to be there that will give then a message to the American and give message to Russia that we will not let Africa fall apart because of your wars. This will bring Egypt in, will bring South Africa, will bring Nigeria. And then likely we can create an African command that can go in order to harmonize these two generals and allow the civilian voice inside, something very visible, very tangible, and is needed as much urgent as possible because it's about to get out of control and they will start destroying everything that you know that is in that.
Indeed.
South Sudan will follow immediately after the north.
Ambassador Erastus Moncha, well, isn't it a pity that hardly had the plane of the UN Secretary General, taxied and lifted?
That's right.
Just last week, we have now the flare-up in Sudan.
Yeah.
And you mentioned, looking at the UN Security Council as it is, its strength, or the arm of its strength, is really timid because the people who are sitting in this particular council, all of them have interest in Sudan. Mm-hmm. We have Russia now, which is on that rolling month of being the president of, United Nations Security Council, which is embroiled in this with the Wagner on the ground. And this is purely because, as you say, it's a proxy war. We have Egypt, we have China, we have Emirati and Saudi and the financing of it as well. Could we actually try and pinpoint, we as Africans ourselves, on how we are fragmented by these forces and how we can come out of it, first of all? And then the question that I will ask, where is the voice of the UN right now and how strong is it on Sudan?
The UN Security Council has already spoken on the matter. And I was surprised that they were able to issue a statement of consensus, but it was one of very, very mundane kind of statement.
But yeah, these are the statements we've always been seeing from the UN. Of course, we'll expect a press statement given by the UN, and then that will be it. Nothing else to follow.
And reading through that statement, one thing you would then see, it is crafted that you can be able to have consensus on it. Because as it is, you have mentioned, Russia, China probably will take a different stance. US and Europe, those are the 5P in the UN Security Council, will not see eye to eye on that. And any one of them can veto. So if you have a veto, then it sends a very bad signal. So issue a statement that shows that the UN Security Council has spoken on the matter. So that's why I said at the beginning, the UN Security Council is dysfunctional. And this is all to do with the geopolitics of the world at the moment. Because you can see this. With Russia, Ukraine, and the rest, the world is now no longer. The institutions that were set up in 1945 to support the global economy, the IMF and the rest, are being challenged.
To maintain security.
They are now being challenged. Yes. They are being challenged. And so we are going to see, as Noah has already said, a multipolar emerging. So we are in transition. And so we now need, that's why you have all this G20 and the rest, because there is no order globally. And so, yes, the answer is it's not working.
It's not working. A threat to the global order, or it is the restructuring of a global order.
Exactly.
Well, there is a question of responsibility. 60 years after independence, and I saw President of Uganda speak about this, and I normally don't agree with President Museveni, but on this issue, Debala, I'm going to tell the old man that I agree with him 100%. He said that what is happening in Khartoum or in Sudan is a mockery of African independence. I agree with him. One of the things that we in Africa do is that whenever there is a crisis, we refuse to embrace it. We tend to want to lurch out to others to come and try and solve our problems. This crisis is an African problem, Debala. It is not a European problem, it is not a UN problem. Essentially, at the core, it is whether or not we can take responsibility for our states, our societies, and our markets and our countries, and be able to intervene in situations in which there is a problem in a particular African country, and we take the responsibility. That way, Debala, we can get our respect in the multilateral world that my senior learned is speaking about. If we cannot fix our backyard, if we cannot deal with the issues in our home front, how are we going to be taken seriously by the rest of the world? It is therefore incumbent upon us. We're not refusing support from the international community. We're not refusing support from the United Nations. We're part of it. We're not refusing help from the international community. We're part of it. But the buck stops with us. And Debala, I believe that the states that have the wherewithal, the capacity to do such things, right now in sub-Saharan Africa, if I can call that, is South Africa. And South Africa has been busy talking about Ukraine, holding kinds of war games with the BRIC countries around Cape Town. And when it comes to Africa, and when it comes to the countries that helped liberate South Africa, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa is very quiet and very silent. And I think that is absolutely outrageous. Debala, it is very important for the Peace and Security Committee in the AU to call an emergency meeting right away of representatives from the 5 regions of this continent, and then to figure out from Addis Ababa within 12 to 24 hours what is the direct impact they can have there. Because if you wait too long, Debala, if you wait, a crisis can only be contained at the very beginning. Indeed. If we let the crisis to metastasize, what is going to happen is that it's going to get out of control.
Right. And Ambassador Erastus Mwencha, we have a boilerplate with Rwanda. You know, we dilly-dallied, we waited, we gave the press statements as well. This is a critical moment to call for emergency before it really boils over to something else that cannot be handled.
Yes.
When do we make the call for the standby forces to be in Sudan? Because now this is an international affair. When do we make this call?
Talking of procrastination, I think I agree with Ash when he said at the beginning that signals have been there that there's a crisis coming, but we all sit and hope that somehow it will disappear until it blows up, and then people now pull up their socks. Yes, the African standby force was set up, but countries were not ready to cede their sovereignty over it. You've seen even the European Union, Merkel travels to China with Macron. Merkel plays the big power. The lady second fiddle. Yes. So you don't allow an institution like European Union to supersede national interests. I mean, if you saw the optics of that trip, it tells you much worse in Africa. So you have an AU that is there to bring voices together, but you don't want to empower AU to act, because you have a standby force who now issues orders. Yes, the military will answer you. It is still going to be a head of state from a country. So, and the head of state will take a position. They will not do so. The standby force is a collection of national forces who are already called a standby force. He can tell you more about it. So there is a problem here that we have not created a standby force that is a force with a doctrine, with equipment that is ready to go. You still have to assemble it and then make a command structure for it. So it doesn't work.
If we have legal instruments like, the ICC, And we have a standby force that we do not know who actually give a command. We're waiting for everyone. Now this is the situation in Sudan. We have a standby force. We're waiting for everyone to give a command. Then how do we? I think the situation is very murky.
Let me answer in two ways. First,
all right. Can I allow me just to take a short break as we mull over that, and then we'll circle back with more. It's 8 o'clock on the nose. You're watching Global Today. Don't go away.
KTN News. Get the whole story. Your Wealth in 90 Seconds, brought to you by Standard Chartered Priority Banking. Do you depend on only one source of income?
My name is Edith Chumba. I take care of consumer, private, and business banking for Standard Chartered Bank in Kenya and East Africa. We have the expertise in priority banking to help our clients initiate a new source of income. Whether you invest with our local bonds or you invest offshore, Standard Chartered Priority Banking will enable you to start building your investments towards retirement. We have a team of experts, our investment advisors, and our relationship managers who are well trained and capable to help you start the conversation of investing for your future. Thank you. Please join Standard Chartered Priority Banking.
Join Standard Chartered Priority Banking today. Email prioritybanking.ke@sc.com. Wealth expertise made to matter.
Very thankful to be here for this launch of both the Club Kiboko Festival and the Mata Heart Run for 2023. What I'd like to urge the public is that indeed these are very noble initiatives, not just nurturing values in our children, but also intervening for children who require several interventions, whether it's surgery or what we call catheterizations for those with heart diseases. So my message is to urge the public to turn up both for the Club Kiboko Festival, 29th of April, and the further Mata Heart Run that will happen on 3rd of June at the Ulinzi Sports Ground.
Be a part of the Club Kiboko Festival and get value on brand experiential and engagement spaces, gaming stations, an expo area, and mentions. Get your tickets today on Ticket Hub at 500 shillings for kids and 300 shillings for adults. To book your space or get more details, call 0727 201 922 or email hkikandi@standardmedia.co.ke. Club Kiboko Festival. Miss it, miss out.
Ajoke, you do me bad. Aya, Ajoke, you do me bad.
Ulitengeza hela, ukaenda South Africa kidogo?
Mimi kweli sijawahi kufika South Africa.
How was it in prison, bro?
Life ni noma huko ndani. I love that Gengetone is emerging.
Kumonchoka ni kufanya nini sasa?
Kumonchoka ni kutokea.
How did you feel after winning?
I was happy about it because it's something I've been working on.
I came from Meru. I didn't just come as mtu ajui ni nini anaenda kufanya.
Impossible is nothing, man. I can tell you. So you don't aim high. You shoot high.
Yote ni vanity. Oh, vanity.